it's this kind of thing. And then in the Kama Sutra, it's also there, without judgment, amazingly without judgment. The LGBTQIA community as a whole is there. And what you find is that the British came and sort of rewrote all of it.
Good evening, or good morning, depending on which part of the world you're calling in from. And welcome to the Commonwealth Club of California. My name is Kalideep Chowdhury, and I'm here to talk to our distinguished guests about the history of the transgender peoples of South Asia and their rights. This event is being recorded and live streamed on the Commonwealth Club's YouTube channel and will be available for download later on commonwealthclub.org. Thank you for joining us. We encourage you to become a member of the Commonwealth Club, and to learn more, please visit the club's website. Before we begin, just a reminder, if you have questions for me or a guest, please post them on the YouTube chat box, and they'll be made available to me during the course of this conversation. Let us begin. On January 20th of this year, and within hours of returning back to power, the Trump administration issued an executive order that the US government would only recognize two genders, male and female, to be determined at birth. By contrast, in 2014, the Supreme Court of India ruled that transgender people have the right to self-identify as male or female or a third gender. And the Transgender Persons Act of 2019, passed by the Parliament of India, allows transgender people to have a self-declared gender and a certificate of identity. It must be noted that similar laws and rulings have been passed by other countries of South Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal, and it is estimated that there are about 5 million people of third gender that live in South Asia alone. To help us understand the implications of that law and its impact, not just for the people of the subcontinent, but beyond, to Asia and for the United States, we've invited two guests for today's discussion. Amrita Sarkar is a leading activist who's been working for the transgender community and their well-being for more than 2 decades. She is one of the founding members and the secretary of IRGT, a global network of trans women, and is a trained counselor and has completed a post-graduation in social welfare. Zia Jafri is the author of The Invisibles, A Tale of the Eunuchs of India, and she has written numerous cover stories, features, and book reviews for publications such as Vogue, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. To both of you, thank you and welcome to this discussion. Amrita, let me start with you. And let me begin by quoting what the Chief Justices of India said during the passing of the ruling in 2014. Justice Chandrachud said, "It is about people wanting to live with dignity, and that any discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation is a violation of the Indian Constitution." And Justice Malhotra goes on to say that any discrimination on the basis of one's sexual orientation would entail a violation of the fundamental right of freedom of expression. These are powerful words. Help us understand the steps that got to the Supreme Court ruling of 2014.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much to Kalideep, Mark, and all our friends here, and thank you for the audience as well to having us, and thank you, Zia, for being with us. So regarding your question, yes, it's right that is it was 2014 when we had this bold judgment. It's called Nalsa judgment, Nalsa versus Union of India, actually the full name. So I have to give you a little bit background as well. I mean, if you know about India, we are a like country with so many language, so many religions, so many castes, so many states, and so many ethnicities, right? So in our history, in our epics, trans people, not only trans people, the entire LGBTIQ people actually had great respects, and there are so many characters. Even if we think about our Lord Ardhanarishwar, half male half female, right? And in epic like Mahabharata. So from there, I think some of you have visited also in India. There are some places like Khajuraho, Konark, and all where you can see sculpture on the wall of the temples. There you can see that the same-sex behavior, multiple sexual behavior was already there in our country long time back. Actually, it's the British. When they ruled us, they criminalized all these LGBTIQ people. But ironically, in today, they have made all this, allowed in their countries. Now they have same-sex marriage in their own country, while we do not have that. But we're absolutely, happy to have this NALSA judgment and following that, the Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act. It's a very bold act. And I actually did a lot of advocacy when the act was in a rule form. There's some flaws, but now we have really, it's a very better position. So yes, so considering that actually we have come a long way, and there are like mixed mindset of the people because the law cannot change the mindset of the people, right? It's a country, the people, the society. They have to think about us. They have to understand us, and it took a long way actually.
Th-
And why don't I begin from my own home? Actually, it says charity begins at home. Then you will get more idea. Here in India, actually, the parents are much more concerned about the relatives, the society, the neighbors, the socio, legal, culture. I mean, what people will say if my child is a trans person, if my child is a gay. So that is the most fair actually within the parents' mind, and that has, I can't say it's gone completely, but definitely we are in a better position. Why I am giving you that idea? On 2014, 15th April, when this NALSA judgment got passed by Supreme Court of India. Actually, coincidentally, I was traveling to Washington, D.C. for a meeting on the same day, and I called my father from the airport that, have you seen that this bold judgment has passed? And he actually surprised me by saying, "Oh, so from now onwards, people like you will get more facility in our country, right?" So that actually gives some kind of a acceptance because earlier that they were very much fear about what will happen to me when they will not be here in this world because the relative will not accept. There is a law that can criminalize people like us. So that fear is not anymore. So this is a brief history actually that yes, we are still on to bring so many changes, but at least we are in a better position today than it was earlier. That I must say.
Thank you. Thank you. And in fact, before I get to what the law actually covers, let me actually turn to Zia. Zia, and this is what Zia, this is what Amrita alluded to, and which I think that you describe in your book, that there's a strong thread that runs through India's history and culture and mythology about the role that trans people have played. What did you find?
Well, I found that there was definitely, a lot of credence given to the LGBTQIA community in the epics. Shiva, of course, was half man, half woman, bisexual, quote unquote, ascetic, all realm of sort of fluidity there. And we also have Arjun, who comes from the Mahabharata. And there's the story of Arjun living in exile and teaching. He's cursed by an apsara. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and sort of a minor deity. And the minor deity says, "You have." I'd like to go to bed with you too, Arjun. And Arjun says, I'm sorry, but I look upon you as a mother. And so she curses him and says, for the rest of your life, you will have no potency whatsoever. And so he dresses and he goes to his father, the god Indra, and says, what do I do? Indra says, let me work it out and we'll shorten the sentence here. It's 1 year. And he dresses as a woman and goes into is working teaching dance and music for that 1 year. And in addition, later in the Mahabharata, there's Sikandi, the story of Sikandi. And this is the story that the Hijras themselves tell, by the way. The Hijras are, we can get into that, but they are sort of a subgroup of the trans people. Let's put it that way. And so Sikandi is, there's constant fluidity, I would say, kind of gender fluidity. Sikandi begins as a man, then turns into a woman, and then ultimately turns back into a man and goes out with Arjun to fight. And there's King Bhishma, who is an opponent at that moment, but they already have worked out a kind of deal. And basically Bhishma says, I have taken an oath that if I come across a guru, a woman, whatever, I will lay down my arms. And so he sees Sikandi and says, he used to be a she, so I will lay down my arms. And so Arjun won in that battle. So it's this kind of thing. And then in the Kama Sutra, it's also there, without judgment, amazingly without judgment. The LGBTQIA community as a whole is there. And what you find is that the British came and sort of rewrote all of it. And ultimately, through their own, moralism, the Victorian era, they sort of turned this group into a criminal caste in a way. And so a lot of the work now is in revising and retranslating some of those ideas and inserting oneself back into history, into these traditions. And even the word eunuch, for example, is a holdover from the British idea.
Thank you, Zed. So both of you raised a number of points, and let's dive into each of these points through the course of this conversation. And so maybe, Amrita, I'll turn to you. India, despite its history, is still a very conservative country. What led the parliament to pass the Act of 2019? What was the motivation? What was the driving force?
Yes, that's a good question, actually. See, as Jia was correctly telling about the epic characters, there were other things also. I mean, maybe some of you have known it already. I'll give that background, then I'll come to your questions. During the Mughal era, there was a tradition that when the king went for the battle, they actually emasculated some men to keep their wife busy with entertainment and also that the men can entertain their wife but cannot have sex with them, and they could sing, they could dance and all. Even Hijra tradition is linked with that as well. So after that, all these things in India, I think if you can Google it, there is a very famous festival. It's called Kuvagam. That's in the Tamil Nadu states. So this festival is all about Lord Aravan. Lord Aravan was the son of this Mahabharata character Arjuna. So the story is that when the Pandava and Kaurav went for the battle, so to get victory of the war, actually Pandava was told that you have to devote or sacrifice one life to get the victory. No one was ready to sacrifice a life. Okay, it was Arjun and Ulupi's son Aravan. He told that yes, I can sacrifice my life to help you to get the victory, but I want to get married, at least for one night. So, who will give their daughter to someone who is going to die the very next day? So it was Lord Vishnu who took the female, like avatar. It's called Mohini, and got married with Lord Aravan. And Vishnu spent whole night, and next morning Aravan sacrificed his life. And as we know, Pandav actually owned the war. So this also actually linked with some traditional Hijra culture or transgender people. They think they are a part of Lord Vishnu actually, and they gets married with the idol of Lord Aravan on a particular day of the like in May. And the next day, when the idol get immersed in a nearby river, they break their bangles, they dress like white saris, and they feel that they have become widows. So this is a very strong tradition, and where not only Indian people, I have seen many foreigners, people from like outside India, they come to see this. So why I'm saying this, that yes, there are some acceptance, non-acceptance part is already I mean always there. But there are something that is very, very much like deep rooted in our culture. If you go to the northeast, it's called Sumanglila, the play of Radha and Krishna, where the Gopini, the friends of Krishna's, roles are played by most of them are trans women actually. So that's why in Northeast in Manipur they are very, very well accepted. No one, I mean, very rare that they are discriminating those people and all. So because we have this strong tradition, cultural, acceptance and all, that's why government also thought that it's not a good task, it's not a good thing to just make them criminalized, make them abnormal, like and so there will be so many other cisgender people and they are a part of our society. They have to realize, and they did. And with a minimum support actually now, I had seen a couple of days now India has one trans pilot actually now. So now we are into any field, like we are doctors, we are engineers, we are in aviations. Because helping the trans people, helping the marginalized actually can help the society itself, that India got understood. And in India, there's a like a hidden thing that the political party also tried to, get the interest of the people by linking it to religions like Hindu. Okay, so the trans people, the Hijra culture, that they also believe that they are also a big part of this, and there the similarity comes where they think that the government and trans people both actually belong to a particular religion, particular culture, ethnicity, so they can become part of us. And I have seen that yes, sometimes Hijra people, trans people, they are actually advocates for the government itself. That also happened. So that is the like history in brief, how we could see ourselves even in the political framework, even in the you know like a socio-legal structure, even in the earlier in this British people got this colonial rule, but now things are over.
Thank you. So, Amrita, what you're saying is that there was a strong cultural and historical and current presence of transgender people, and that allowed it to be a lot more accepting to the Indian Parliament. And there was a religious element to it that further led to the passing of the bill.
Absolutely.
But now let me turn to Zia. And yet, Zia, on the reverse side of the coin, and let's dive into the term hijras and eunuchs. On the reverse side of the coin, you call them the invisibles. Why did you call them the invisibles?
Well, I mean, it's a paradox, right? Because they're highly visible, but they're also, when I went, we're talking 1984. So we just have to look at it historically. Even the subtitle of my book is anachronistic. And there wasn't that much out there, and the language has all changed around this subject, So, but I thought it was an interesting paradox that, I went to a wedding. It had all been sort of, everyone was invited like months in advance, the who's who guest list and all of that. And these very middle class family. And the drivers all sitting around, and, it's by invitation only. And into this wedding walked the hijras. And the hijras were sort of dressed in sort of tattered saris, and they came with a dhola drum, and they were sort of jesting and laughing at people or with them, and sort of making fun of people lightly. And people were laughing, and then they were kind of paid to leave. And so I was very interested in this sort of paradox, like a country that accepts and rejects. I didn't feel like it was just a pure acceptance, but it was also, it made a space for them. And it was, in a way, a sort of ancient welfare system that was developed for, in this case, I would say the lower classes. I would definitely say there's a class element to it. And why I call them invisibles is because of that. But I also want to make a little point that, I've been reading some Palestinian literature recently, and one writer had written that it's not that we are invisible. We are visible all the time, but it's that we are illegible. And I thought it was a beautiful concept that, how do you read this third way and this third space that isn't just binary, right? And so I feel like the invisibles, even, yes, it's changed now from when I wrote the book to more visible. There's much more activism, there's much more going on. But at the same time, the jobs remain the same, The for the hijras particularly, and the hijras are a particular subset of the trans community.
Thank you, Zia. And Amrita, for the sake of our audience, could you explain the difference or the similarities, or how does the Hijra community tie in, come fall within the transgender community?
Yeah, so actually, here comes the role of HIV interventions, how it happens. Yeah. So, in early 2000, it was very difficult for the donor bodies, it was for the various stakeholders to identify this, like who are these people who are hijras, who are transgender, because earlier what happened actually in our National AIDS Control Program Phase 3, under the MSM umbrella, I mean, man having sex with men, transgender people got counted. So that actually created a lot of trouble because trans people needs and MSM people's needs are not same. So, and also we wanted the segregated data that was not there. I mean, how many MSM people are actually MSM who are infected by HIV? How many trans people are actually trans people who are affected by HIV? It was very difficult to find out. So actually, coincidentally or thankfully, I was also part of this process. So in 2008, what happened? UNDP, United Nations Development Program, the India part, and I was actually very much into that process. That with support of UNDP, we did 6 regional consultations in India. Okay, followed by 1 national level consultation in Delhi to find out, to work on the working definition of hijra and working definition of the transgender people. And there was representative from the hijra community, from the trans community, from each states. And we came up with the like solid definitions, like transgender in India is an umbrella term. So one who is, got some assigned sex at birth, but follow the gender norms of the opposite sex can be identified as a transgender person. But hijra we identified as a socio-cultural identity. So people who follow that particular culture under a particular master or guru, maintain the rituals of the hijra community, they will be identified as a hijra people. So that helped the, to bring the clarity that transgender is a hijra identity. I'm sorry, transgender is a gender identity, and hijra or kinnar is a socio-cultural identity. It's a culture actually. So that help, that helped us. Also, for the not only for the HIV/AIDS in intervention, later National AIDS Control Organization (NACO) they also adopted this. So that's the way actually now we are very much clear, pretty clear, that these people are transgender, people are coming under the transgender umbrella because you can even easily think about it. The transgender can be a like trans men who are female assigned at birth too, right? And they can be trans women, they can be intersex people, there will be hijras, other identities. So it's a umbrella kind of a category, a larger definition. But hijra is a very specific identity with specific socio-cultural activity. Yeah.
And Amrita, just to follow up on that, did that muddy the water in your fight for equality? Did it lead to confusion amongst the peoples of India? How did it affect the struggle?
No, it actually helped us, right? Helped us to, go beyond in the sense now we have segregated data in the HIV prevalence rate, right? That okay, many people are affected, like who are transgender people got affected by HIV. These are MSMs, these are IDUs, and all these things. And this actually helped the health ministry, the health department, to get that data to work more seriously with us. And so I will give you a couple of information. Now we have a national level transgender network in India. At the same time, we have a transgender technical resource group that is by NACO, National AIDS Control Organization. I am also part of that. There are so many organizations who are trans-led, leading trans specific, capacity building program or other interventions. So, and now the most important thing is that the ministry, the MOSJ, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, after this transgender person, this act came in 2019. Now we have a rule, okay? Trans Act is followed by the trans rule now. And most important thing is that now we have a national transgender portal. So if you Google it, National Transgender Portal India, it will take you to a site actually. And this portal is very, very much helpful to link with the government. So if I am a trans woman or a Hijra identified person, I can go to that portal, I can register myself to get various facilities, including health insurance, including educational scholarship. If I'm thrown out from the family, I can seek for like short shelter homes. So there are some services, but yes, to get those, one has to get into the portal and to get registered to the portal. Yes, but there is a problem also. Problem is, as per the last census that was in 2011, the number of the transgender people in India, the official figure is 4.88 lakhs. Yeah, but actual figure is quite higher. But if you go to the portal, you can see only 30,000 people got registered, got the transgender identity card. Even I got registered in the portal. When I did my medical transition, legal transition, much before this act came in 2014. But because I worked closely with the ministry, with my community, and also I think it's like our responsibility, right? How government can help us if we don't help government to know more about us, right? So we have to work hand in hand. So I think this is a very important thing. Now in India, we are having this national transgender portal, and there are many NGOs like us. I work for Alliance India, also known as India HIV/AIDS Alliance. We have a specific intervention program, but the main part is to get the transgender people to get their transgender identity card, help them to get any other service, and more onto that. The unreached area is actually gender affirming care. Earlier it was, but there are actually now couple of intervention. AIMS. AIMS means All India Institute of Medical Science. Now, I mean, Alliance India have a help desk at Delhi AIMS, and we help the transgender community to get the medical services. This is also scaling up in different states. So that's the way now we are into spreading from a marginalized community to get all our services we need.
Thank you. Let me now transition now to Zia. Zia, prior to the act being passed, you wrote in your book that the Hijras would organize into communities, as Amrita just alluded to, that there would be communities of Hijras, and they formed their own families, they formed their own tribes. And very often they looked to the police, and there was a mutual role of the police helping or protecting the Hijras, who were then the marginalized. What did you find?
Well, I mean, it's not just a simple helping the Hijras kind of situation. I mean, they harassed them. There's all sorts of horrible stuff involving the trans people and the police. But in my case, I couldn't get anywhere in Delhi. There was a rule of silence amongst the Hijra community. They didn't talk unless they had permission. And there was a unionizer who was quite corrupt. And I really was getting nowhere in Delhi. And so I ended up doing my research in Hyderabad, where it was just sort of more like a town. And the Hijra community was well established. Everyone knew where they were. They had these quite lovely, I mean, the one house that I went to was just a lovely piece of property. And they had a relationship with the police. They're a very complex one, because obviously for sex work and stuff like that, they were picked up. I mean, basically that only recently changed, right? Men who sleep with men. I mean, that was a whole issue. The British had outlawed it. Homosexuality, quote unquote, was outlawed. So they had that problem with local police. But at the highest level, what had happened was they were being harassed. And they had this valuable property. And so the tax inspector was coming and harassing them, the sanitation inspector. And they were just trying to get them to sell off their land really quickly and at a very low rate. And so they went and approached the police department. They knew, I guess, of the reputation of the deputy police commissioner. And they said, the guru, the head, went and spoke to the police commissioner and said, this is happening and can you help us? And so he then said, he went and sent an inspector to inquire about the details. And then he called together the politicians who in fact were trying to harass them to get their land. So he said, look, they have nothing. They only have this land. And if you do this, they'll really have nothing at all. So can you please just stop? And he said, out of respect, so this is very kind of India, right? Out of respect for him, they did this. And as a result of that, he was invited to see their ways, and he got to become friends with them in some way. So it was a very interesting relationship, but I would say it's not the norm, if that makes sense.
And what did you find out how these communities organize themselves, the Hijra communities?
They were completely, I mean, interesting. It's like a family, right? And basically these children who feel that they are, they don't fit, they feel female identified, in this case, trans women, they are eventually sort of inducted into these households and then sort of asked to become members of these households. And in return for that, it's very hierarchical. There's a guru and then a disciple, and it's very strict, actually. Your relationship can be good, bad, or indifferent, depending on who is your guru. And they had a central fund. People didn't starve. Everyone contributes. So their traditional activities are going and singing and dancing and blessing children, and blessing husband and wife as they're about to marry. And so a percentage of whatever was earned was given to the guru. And the guru then maintained the property, maintained the community, and paid if you were ill. And so it was very sort of organized, and also, by states. And there were letters that people wrote. They were not generally literate, but people wrote the letters for them, if you know what I mean. So they communicated within the whole community, and disputes were settled from within.
And
that's what I learned.
no,
Yeah.
thank you. And to press further on that point, You've alluded to this somewhat briefly. How did they earn a living? Did they earn a living through jobs in the private sector, or were they outside? And how did they go about earning the living? How did they go about earning that, building up the community?
Yeah, I mean, basically what the British had done was sort of turn them into beggars and probably pushed, people from the villages to the big cities. And the whole goal was to get rid of this Hijra subcaste. But the way they earned a living was, at least in Hyderabad also, it had an elevated sort of, the last princely Mughal estate days, right? And so there was that tradition of inviting Hijras into the households, and blessing the children, even when the child is 4 years old. There was that tradition. And what I found was that they were also cooks. Like the sixth Nizam had a lot of Hijras in his household. And so they were cooks, they were employed that way. They used to go and visit the Hijra Ka Alawa. But mainly it was dancing, singing, and sex work, I would say. Those were the sort of three categories. And then, of course, they were hired in the homes for various things, because that was a Hyderabadi kind of culture, and it was true of also Lucknow, as far as I know. Yeah.
And so, Amrita, now that the act has been passed, do you see a transition from those one might call marginal roles into more mainstream roles in Indian society, and how is that acceptance coming along?
Yeah, see, so actually, Jia has actually said the path. Actually, you are correctly mentioned about this typical activities they are involved into. Absolutely fine. But nowadays, actually, when the number of this community is getting increased, now you have to understand, in India, we have rural areas. In India, we have town, we have cities. So the acceptance level also very different. I mean, if we are going to a rural part of India, maybe they have their own myths and also. So sometimes they also worships. Like if you go to Gujarat, you can see the Bahuchara Mata temple where they are praised as goddess. At the same time, if you can see a Hijra person in the capital of India or any other metropolitan cities, like begging in the traffic signal, that also you can see. And if also, like if they don't have money, sometimes they also get engaged into sex work, right? But things are changing. I cannot say that everything is like got solved, but a couple of things definitely has changed. I mean, I have a friend, I am not naming her, but she actually completed her PhD being a Hijra identified person because her guru is quite supportive. So we
Mm.
have a handful of that community also where they are thinking that education can play a big role if
Yeah.
to open up as like so-called other people in the society. They can come up, they can mainstream themselves. But yes, that number is very, very poor. But in other words, if I talk about the transgender people, as you know, definitely it's not typically associated with the Hijra culture, and there can be trans men, trans women. So they are mostly engaged into like jobs, healthcare settings, or any other like government job, private jobs, because they can actually get the education. But the problem is the education system we have to sensitize. I mean, we have to bring the gender sexuality curricula at the educational level. That is very, very much important because we have a high rate of dropout of children who are the trans people. And if I'm getting dropping out from my education, then at that point of time, I will have only two ways: either to join sex work, either to join the hijra culture, right? But very few of us actually have struggled, I mean, to completed their education or doing some job or contributing to the society. I think this is another area. Definitely, the government will work on it. We are continuously suggesting them what are the other areas you can bring in. And now in there are so many states of India where they have the Transgender Welfare Board, where state government are actually helping the community, making a board where there are government people, of officials, or the community people. They are working together. At the same time, there is a national level transgender council that actually works as a bridge between the central government and the rest of the people who are, belong to this community. So things are coming, yes. So the again, I'm saying this that it will take a long time because still there are some gaps. If I talk about marriage equality, if I talk about rape law, if I talk about inheritance act, there we do not have any existence. Even in the medical curricula, also that has to be revised. Right? Yes, I think the new medical curricula introduced the transgender identity, but not in the very huge way as it should be. So things are changing, but we still need more.
Thank you. I want to shift tack just a little bit because both of you have brought up the colonial role. And let me actually allude to Polynesia, the countries that make up the Polynesian islands, that have traditionally been a place for gender fluidity. In fact, there's some specific terms, Mahu and Rere, who were respected spiritual figures. And they were honored and noted for having both masculine and feminine traits. And they played very important roles as healers and caretakers and cultural educators. And what's interesting is when the French started the nuclear testing program in Polynesia in the 50s and 60s, there was a sudden influx of a very large assortment of French army personnel. And that led to many of these transgender people who had historically been accepted in Polynesian society, very respectable members of society, now to transition over into sexual roles as a way to make some money. And as a result, because of that, they were then marginalized. And a group of people that had been respected members of society now find themselves marginalized. But it's now only that it's coming back to power. So Zia, you brought up in your book and in this conversation on the Victorian laws that were passed during the British rule of India. What did you find, and how did that affect the morals of Indian society, and how that changed?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I have all that more to add, but I know that there was a great debate. So sort of Richard Burton was involved in this, and he's, considered an Orientalist. And sort of from 1842 to 1871, there was a lot of correspondence about the abomination called the Hydras, right? And so basically they were shocked that they were land owning, and they couldn't believe that if they were taking over, the role of government now, that they would be, perpetuating landlordism amongst the Hydras, who apparently did have land deeds given to them by kings, and they also had territorial rights and begging rights. And so they had areas where they could go, and different Hydra communities had boundaries. And so they had both the land and the begging rights. And this is what the British wanted to get rid of. And they made it an offense coming out into the open bazaar in female clothes and soliciting, having a child in your home. That was forbidden or outlawed, basically. So essentially, they just wanted to make this whole tradition extinct. That's what they tried to do. And then what you find is that historians started just sort of, even the Indian historians were picking up with the British code of ideas. So I think I touched on this earlier. That's what needs to be overturned. Because in fact, the country had much more diversity than is reflected in those texts. I think am I answering your question, Kalideep? I feel like I sort of said this before.
No, I think you've expanded on that. And Amrita, sometimes you look back with a rosy pair of colored glasses, right? You look back and you say, well, all was wonderful then. And then the British came and then everything went to pot. Is that really true? Or do you really think that those specific colonial laws had a role to play in how transgender people were viewed in India and in the subcontinent?
Yes, absolutely. It's a colonial law, actually. Not only the trans people, but the Hijra identified people, the LGBTIQ people, all set of people got criminalized, actually. So, absolutely, it's a colonial law. And after the British actually left our country, I mean, post independence, there's a High Court Act actually passed but that also, gave some kind of advantages, but ultimately, it was there with the like taboo or the label that this set of people are criminal. So we are still criminal at that point of a time. That's why I was telling you that when the HIV/AIDS intervention program came, actually the health program started and all these things, then government realized that they are a very big part of our society. We have to work for their health as well. Uh, because HIV, how it spreads, as is very simple, one from another, right? It's a route of blood actually. So government has to understand, and they did actually, that they could not avoid us. If they have to make the health intervention effectively, they have to involve this community. And I cannot say that is the only reason, but there's another part was both of us, Gia and me, were telling about there were earlier some like knowledge and information that how we are associated with history, culture, ethics, and all. So there are like a couple of reasons actually government has to consider. And we had this IPC section 377 Indian Penal Code that actually criminalized men having sex with men. So that actually used at earlier point of time to harass not only the MSN people but also the trans people, anyone actually. That's a behavior actually. So if police identify or sometimes it's for extortion, money, they blackmail, they abused. That is, on the name of this particular act, IPC Section 377. So, in NAS Foundation International, they actually, throw a petition in early 2000. There were so many other organizations who were in the picture. Then finally, it got rid of in 2018. So this 377 is still there, but thankfully, it's came like this. So if there's a like a man who is also interested to sex with another man, and if he's adult, above 18 years old, and having sex with consent. So if two people who are gay or MSM identified and they are both adults and they are having consent for both of them, then they are actually not criminalized. They can get rid of IPC section 377. So that's a good part actually, that it also brings that no one can force to have sex with.
Yeah.
And yeah, and at the same time, this 2014 NALSA judgment, when that came, that brought the idea of self-identification. That was very, very much important. Government gave that, options to us, just like other cisgender male and cisgender female. The trans people can also identify themselves as a transgender person, as a male or as a female. That was a very bold step. But l- later on, much work has happened, but the this act came actually with its much more features, services, and all. Because it's not talking about the legal rights. Act is talking about all the aspects, including education, including health, and even including. I'm giving a very brief example of the gender affirming care, how it should be in line with the WPATH, World Professional Association for Transgender Health Guideline. That also this act has talked about. But at the same time, there are a couple of things like if I talk about the punishment part, that has to be little bit improved, because the act, according to the act, if a person is getting harassed or a hijra or a trans identified person, the perpetrator can get the punishment from 6 months to 2 years with a bail. But for the cisgender woman in India, this is actually minimum, punishment start from 7 years. So this is a part actually still a gray area that we have to further work on. But in the questions of, like, if I talk about inclusivity, if I talk about access to healthcare, access to education, access to legal services, and this act actually talks much more about that. Yes.
So the act has fallen short in some areas when overall the act has greatly improved the lives of transgender people.
Absolutely.
There's a line from a documentary movie made by transgender activists here in the United States, and this question is for you Amrita, is by Jamie Clayton. And she says that the more positive representation there is, the more confidence the community gains, which actually puts us, the transgender group, in more danger. In other words, the more visibility you have, there's a greater risk of being put in danger. So how has that changed your life from both a personal perspective and from a family support perspective? How has it been seen by a community?
See, actually, I have tried this. I addressed this concern in earlier one of your questions. Actually, when I was talking about the mentality of the Indian parents, because of the society, because of the this laws and all. That was earlier. If I talk about IPC section 377, that was very much there. So anyone can be, pushed under this IPC section 377. It can be a Hijra person, it can be a MSM, transgender, anyone, right? But now this Transgender Act is very, very much there. The rule is there. The IPC 377 got repealed. Now the parents who are in a better position to accept their child. Earlier, what they have to do, they had a fear in their mind, and that was constantly happening. What happened to her school? What happened to the workplace? What happened with the neighbors? No one will accept them. They are like criminals. So that fear is not here today. That is the main part. Okay, but yes, changing the law, you cannot change the mindset of the common people over the night. And also, it is very, very much important to sensitize all the government department. I mean, even still today, even after the act, we can see some kind of an incident, but very, less in number that people are getting harassed from our communities. Sometimes they are thrown out of the job if someone is living with HIV or is identified as a trans person, or like police are harassing them or misgendering. That is also a big part, because government has done their part. Now it's government also has to do another thing, involving the CSOs, the civil society organization, the NGOs, the activists, resource persons like us, to train their different officials, to train the different ministry, to train different departments, including education, including healthcare, and that is very, very much needed. Time to time, I go to various training session, to schools, to universities, sometimes corporates, sometimes in the health sector. I mean, our NGOs, and like me, there are other people also who are involved in these parts. I think that's the way actually we can set the path, because then only it's not only about service area, access to service, but to change the common mindset of the people, we have to spread awareness. That's why when I give, sensitization or training to a particular healthcare setting, I also tell them that you have to bring the other staff, you have to bring nurse, you have to bring the even the person who is at the gates, security personnel. Sometimes we cannot get into the hospital, right? At the gate itself, the any Hijra or trans identified person can be stopped. So from the entry point, from the security personnel, the clerical staff, paramedical staff, lab staff, nurse, doctors, this range of the different people who, if I talk, giving example of our like healthcare clinic, everyone has to be trained and everyone has to be sensitized. That's the way I think we can actually think about mainstreaming our issue, or making the access to services in a community friendly way.
And that is accessible to anyone who wants to become a transgender person, correct? And this is applies to the Hijras as well.
Yes, absolutely. Because the Hijra or Kinnar, this clarity is very much today that they are part of the larger transgender umbrella. But yes, there are still people who are carrying their own preconceived notions that even today. See, India is a big country with almost like 150 crores of population, right? And the act came in 2019. This NASA judgment came in 2014. So within 10 years or 20 years, you cannot expect that all these 150 crore people, got the clarity about who are these people and all. But definitely, a significant percentage of the so-called, normal people or the society, the common people, different departments, at least like sound amount of them have got some kind of a awareness or idea that hijra or trans people are not the same, but they can be further worked on. We have to improve our service areas, including education, healthcare. The things are going on actually, but it will take time. Definitely, it will take time.
And Amrita, there are recourses, there are avenues for recourses in middle class society, in corporate jobs, etc., on the aspect of discrimination.
Yes, that actually the main root cause is this education actually. I mean, if I am educated enough, if I'm skilled enough, I can get a job. Right now in India, there are many corporates who have D&I, this diversity and inclusion cell actually, where LGBT can people, if one is skilled enough, can think about to apply, right? And there are lots of companies who are their CSR, and CSR funds. And the main problem is that if I'm not educated enough, if I'm not skilled enough, how I can expect to get a job? That can be not for a Hijra person. That can be for anyone, right? That's why I'm telling you, education is the backbone. Education part has to be straight. Strengthened. The teachers, the students, the professor, if a university, if I talk about a college, that is the awareness level we have to bring in. So when I am educated, my college is accepting the trans people, they are accepting the people who are, for example, lesbian or intersex or hijra, whoever, they are sitting on the same platform, getting the same education without any fear, without any discrimination. Then only we can think about, right, getting a good job. Otherwise, like, even I have struggled a lot, but the education sector is not sensitized. Maybe I could go farther in terms of getting education to get my higher education. But still I have, for example, made some spaces, I am getting some job in a workplace, but it's not actually bringing some effective changes. Why? Because maybe the workplace policy, because they are not sensitized enough about this employee who are so-called LGBTIQ identified people. We still have some concern. I mean, we get some information like if a trans person is working in a call center, and if she is not getting no access to female washroom, basic problem I'm talking about, right? So that is the thing actually. So the colleagues actually, if they could be sensitized at their school level, they could be acting a different way. I am giving you a very small example that will also help you to open your eyes. As I was telling you, I time to time I go to schools and colleges. Couple of years back, I went to a very famous schools in Delhi. There were around 300 and 400 students, including their teachers, and they had their some questions in their mind. But after my session, they told me that, see, actually, what happened so far, we did not have any idea that how you people, I mean, people who are identified as a trans person or hijra or LGBTIQ people can also contribute to our society, can also get your education. It's just a minimum support that we actually do not give to you. Because if we see people like you, we get bullying you, harass you, making fun of you. But after this lesson, now we will not do it, and we'll also not let others to do it. So that is the changing part, the mainstreaming part. That is very, very much important. Either I talk about any sector, education, workplace, that is a huge area actually to cover. And it's not a couple of only Amrita or a couple of people like me, couple of organization. It's entire nations, entire departments, government official, everyone has to work hand in hand.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me turn to Zia now. Zia, Amrita brought up the question of identity. And yet, during your research, you talk about this activist who urged you not to box me. What did she mean?
No, sorry, it's not in my book. In my research recently.
Yes.
Oh, no, I saw a campaign online. Basically, I know very little about it, but it's in honor of Transgender Day. And basically, It encouraged people who were influencers to unbox me, to show solidarity with the trans people. And it was very beautifully done. It had, say a trans woman sitting on a chair with a box and saying, we all had these boxes, all girls had these boxes, right? And so I put my wishes and my dreams in there. And it was a way of saying, don't look at me just in this tiny little box as well. Let me unbox me and see what's in my box. And so I guess various famous people would open these boxes, each would open one and then read the wishes in there, is what I remember. But Amrita, you may know a little bit more about this sort of idea of, in a way, glamorizing and humanizing at the same time. Yeah.
And so, speaking of that, Amrita, we have some questions coming in from the audience. One of the questions that have come up, and this is addressed to you, Amrita, is about heroes that you've been inspired by or modeled yourself after. What led you onto this path? The people in the audience would like to know.
Really, this question actually I get many times. I mean, who is your idol? Who is your hero actually? I think it's my mother. I definitely today I have to talk about her because she was a school teacher. Today she is no more physically with me, but she used to go to the school. I am their only kid actually, and I was thinking how my mother can play a multiple roles as a teacher, as a caregiver, as a mother, as a homemaker. So I was very very much influenced by her. I was thinking that in I have to become like my mother, the different role she was playing. Because father, I'm not saying that like I'm not bringing the equality part, but usually what I had seen my father going early to his work, coming home from work in the evening and all. But mother throughout the day, I mean, she had to take care of me. She had to take care of her students, schools, home, the cooking, but everything. Time I was just thinking about how a person can be involved in so many things. That's why I was very, very much influenced by her. When she was out, I was trying her clothes and all. This was very in early childhood when I was in class 3 or 4. Later, I realized that I had a different person within me. Even after male ascended birth, I could myself that I think sometimes I have to become like my mother. And slowly, also when I came across with my community, with the people who are bullied, discriminated at that point of time, I realized that these are the people. Maybe I belong to the same category, and I have to finish my education. Even I was put in a boys' school, but I had to face a lot of challenges. But I did complete my educations so that I can work for my community. So this is a brief you know history or information, you can say, that helped me actually to.
Thank you. And that's a very personal story. So thank you for sharing that very personal story. We've actually come almost near the end, and we've got quite a few questions. And a lot of the questions pertain to one thing. And let me just give the background. The Germany's parliament on April the 12th, 2024, passed a landmark law that allowed transgender people and non-binary people to modify the legal documents to reflect the gender identity. Now, the question that's been asked of me and to ask you is to say, what can the rest of the world, especially here in the United States, learn from the laws and rulings that have been passed in India and in the subcontinent? And that is for you, Amrita.
Okay, so you actually given the answer yourself. Actually, the problem is when we identify the problems, the half of the problem is over. So the thing is that if we yes, so that is the part actually. So if people who are in a different country, they have a different law, different mindset, different settings. But we also have to think about that there were like maybe different government earlier who was very very much friendly, but maybe this time my community is not getting that much of acceptance in the United States of America. So this is a request actually. I think there will be other countries as well. It's not only US, but if I think about like Afghanistan or any other places, right, where people are same way the trans people are, dealt with, right? But at the same time, there are like countries, European countries, as you give an example of the Germany, India, and all other places where people are coming out. They are helping the government. The community is working with the government. For example, I am associated with the National AIDS Control Organization as a TRG, Technical Resource Group member. Time to time, we also get involved to bring ministry level official to our events to give the space where community and government can come to the same space and they can deliver the dialogue from one to another. That is very, very much important. See, actually, we have to understand it's not only the cisgender people. If we have to think about the overall progress of the country, overall progress of the nation, everyone has to contribute to everyone. That is the idea. Everyone has to work in hand in hand. If we can feel that, okay, this part of people are marginalized, negligible, this, they cannot do anything. That is the wrong idea. And India has shown the path. It's not only for the Transgender Act I'm talking about, but now you can see people from my community are involved in many professions, in like police department, in healthcare, in all other places. So that's actually, they are contributing to the society. They are contributing to the cause, not only for themselves. That's why people are also taking time to understand us. Definitely, yes, so much work has to be done, but yes, this kind of activity, this kind of initiative has to be think about the government, that they are also a part of our society. Because I must conclude with a very famous quote of our respected Prime Minister Modi ji: "Sabke saath, sabka vikas." Means if you have to think about overall development, you have to do it with everyone. That is the idea.
And on that powerful note and statement about including everyone, including those in the marginal sides of our society, let us now end. And I would like to thank our guests tonight, Zia Jaffrey and Amrita Sarkar, for their contributions for today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
God bless you. Take care.
Thanks.